Hello and welcome to 209 Prep Sports Media. We will utilize this podcast and various social media sites to share information, highlight weekly matchups, promote the talent of the 209, and most of all, create a platform for our athletes. In an era dominated by social media and internet, we've also lost print media and the writers who love writing about prep sports. Some of them have their own social media accounts where they freelance and cover sports. Some are writing for a few newspapers still covering prep sports. And we hope to have some of these writers on as weekly guests to share their insights, thoughts, and ideals about the various hot topics of the week. Hello, and welcome back to 209 Prep Sports. In the studio with Scott Bryant today. We're out for the last couple of weeks, have a bunch of stuff going on and in our personal lives, but not so much on the sporting front. But there's a few things coming up. Actually, today, Let 'Em Play is up at the Capitol. Delivering 10,000 letters written by student athletes from across the state, and pretty much begging at this point to get the governor and the powers that be to open up athletics for the kids. So that's, it's been a positive for as far as the movement goes between Let 'Em Play and the California Coaches Association. Those two groups have been paramount in at least getting the ear of Newsom and the director of health for the state of California. So there is some positive movement. Oregon approved all sports to return yesterday, I think with a early March start date. So things are starting to go the right direction.
Yeah, but let's face it, Oregon was kind of forced to do that when they decided to approve all illicit drugs. I mean, how can you keep student athletes from playing high school sports if you just made methamphetamine a legal substance in the state of Oregon? So, I think they kind of strong-armed themselves on that, but yeah, even without that, all kind of joking aside, Oregon is stepping up and they're making sports activities available again, which really puts us in last place when it comes to kind of releasing the what I think and again my personal opinion was a mistake to begin with. We've all dealt with this on a personal level and we all believe that this is real, but, when we look back on this historically, we're going to find out how many mistakes we made doing this. And the extreme effects it's having on our children right now. I mean, it's, we're taking a culture and we're actually bending the culture right now from, we've heard the statement, you and I talked about this offline. We heard the statement made by, there was a young athlete out of the Bay Area that is taking a lot of flack for sending a letter to, the governor stating, "Hey, let me play. I need game film," whatever. I'm kind of paraphrasing. It was along those lines. And now he's catching flack from people basically telling him, "Hey, look, football is not the most important thing in the world." A lot of demeaning comments like that on his Facebook page or, Instagram, whatever he's posting. And in reality, it really is that important because, there could be an instance where you have a student athlete like that who that is his pathway to get a college education because maybe the family can't afford to send him to college. And so, actually, yeah, football is the most important thing in his life right now. So, we have to be cognizant of the fact that, youth sports, other youth activities that are banned, really let me back up a little bit, really could be a pathway to something bigger and better for these kids. And when we have a governor that says, do as I say, not as I do, where he takes his own children and moves them to another state so they can participate in activities, we have to cry foul. And,
Yeah. And today we're not, it's been, this podcast is meant to promote prep sports, and we've kind of fell into a lull because we don't have a lot to talk about at this point, but we're going to revisit or just kind of visit where the county lies and stands right now. But then today's topic will be more about the importance of sports to our youth and coaches. Scott and I, both played, have both coached at, multiple levels. And so I think, that's where we'll get to. But before we get there, let's talk about some new things that have happened. So yesterday, the new ruling for the CIF was that they're going to now allow kids to play 2 sports at once. And the way I understand it, it's not just travel sports and say football and travel baseball, or say softball, or say, golf and travel softball or whatever. It's going to, from my understanding, when your season completes, so say football completes, because they want it done by, late March or late April at the latest, to give the kids time for their bodies to heal before the fall season. So when football ends, if baseball is still going at the school you go to, it's my understanding, now I could be wrong, but it's my understanding that your kid would be allowed to go to play that next sport, whether it be track or baseball or what have you. So,
yeah. And that's definitely an improvement. I still think we're, even with that said, we're a little bit restrictive, and there's still going to be, and maybe you have some more intel on this because I know you follow this very closely, but, where we're going to be at, not only in terms of the kids getting to participate, but at what level parents are able to become spectators, if at all, how much participation on that side of things as well, because we know, as much as important it is to the kids, it's very important. And I can tell you firsthand, it's very important to me as a father to be able to see when my kid competes, being able to see them. And so, I don't know.
And
if
it's important for her. It's important for your kid for you to see them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We spent a whole episode talking about, or multiple episodes where we're interviewing kids that have committed, and they really talk about the support. So, and that comes from, looking up in the stands and seeing mom and dad, or, seeing their brother or sister, whatever. And we've both participated. We know it's important. But if we're not able to have that interaction, and the alternative is to have the kids participate without people in the stands, that's still better than nothing. But I'm hoping that at least maybe, the schools are prepared to do like a live streaming or something like that. So they're, they can still see their kids participate.
Yeah. I mean, and that's going to be, we're going to have hurdles, and we've talked about this at nauseum almost in the last, couple of months, because so much speculation, and we start talking about what if. Well, and that's where we're at. So if we get to play, now is the next step. Are the parents going to be allowed? So for instance, like my daughter, it starts this weekend. They play it there. She plays at Oregon, and she's going to Grand Canyon to play a tournament. They only gave the whole team of Oregon 10 tickets for the whole weekend. 10 tickets per game. So I mean that, and most families travel together, so your mom and dad are coming to the game, and only one of them's going to get to come, or both of them are going to get to come. But then the tickets started with the seniors and trickled down. Well, didn't even get to the juniors, and the tickets are gone.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm on the other side of that, where I consider myself very lucky. 2 weekends ago, my daughter, who plays hockey in college, we were able to go to Minnesota and actually attend a game. So her mother and I and her sister got to sit in the stands and actually got to watch a game. It was a little surreal because it was just family members from both teams, but they strategically placed people in the stands, so you were keeping this social distancing away. But so we were doing that, but then between periods, everybody gets up and walks out into the foyer, and they're all standing together, talking and having conversation. So, I get it. Probably weren't supposed to do that. There's some rules that are very specific. Too. Yeah. So, but it was, we were lucky to do that. So for me, a sport like softball, where you're playing it outdoors, and if the facility allows for, certain amount of spectators, then to me, that's a tough one. You should be allowed to let family members in, because you can socially distance them in the stands so everybody's apart, but still get to watch the game. So, I don't understand the logic on that one, but at least we're moving in the direction,
Yeah. And I think, the last thing we'd like to talk about in regard to where the status of the state of California before we get into today's topic is, basically the tiers have not moved. I mean, and the subject matter is so trivial. There's a lot of conflict on both sides. Some people are arguing that it's not stringent enough. Some are arguing that it's too stringent. At the end of the day, it hasn't moved. There's a couple of counties that have, and they're not even close to us, and so I'm not going to get into that. But We do see a drastic decline in not only people testing positive, but also ICU cases and deaths. So we're starting to see things trend the right way. Everybody again knew this was going to happen. 4 to 6 weeks out after New Year's, that you're going to see a rapid decline in numbers, and and it's just like when they projected that they would go up in December, and we decided to punt to December to start all of our seasons. It was almost a setup. It was almost like you were not going to get to play, and everybody knew we weren't going to get to play, but that's the decision that was made. So we're living with that. This is where we are, and so hopefully we get some good news by the end of next week. Really, the target date for football is going to be March 22nd. So because they need to basically make a decision so they can start the following week with conditioning for 2 weeks, and then games would start 2 weeks after that. So you're in a 5 to 6 game season. I've heard a lot of positive stuff. So I told my team yesterday in conditioning that you asked me the question a month ago, if we were going to play this season, I'd look you dead in the eye and tell you I don't think so. And I think for today, the way I feel today, I think so. There's a very good chance that we play. Now, if I put odds on it, I'd probably say something like 70-30, 60-40, something like that we play. That's
great news. And from a perspective of, me not being a current coach like you, and my focus more on the podcast that we're providing, the whole goal of this podcast was to cover youth sports. And I don't feel like we've been able to do that in recent weeks. And so I can't tell you how excited I am that this is going to happen, because our goal is to really highlight, our athletes. And now that they're going to be performing, we're going to have content. This podcast is actually going to have content that people are going to want to hear, more so than what we've been providing, because we've been just kind of giving updates on COVID and where we're at and all that. And we've had the opportunity to talk to a couple of local athletes, which is great, and we'll continue to do that. But really the goal of the podcast was to, be able to highlight maybe a football game of the week, and then have conversations with coaches, and have, coaches come on our show and talk about their team as it is now and what their projections are. And when that finally comes to fruition, I tell you what, it's gonna be so fun. I mean, it's really gonna be a great adjunct for us to provide to the coaches and athletes to be able to promote themselves. And I'm very excited about that.
Myself as well. I think it's long overdue, obviously. And we talk a lot about football, because I think football is the driving force right now. Let Them Play and the California Coaches Association are the two organizations that are really behind this move.
And it's the one sport that really is kind of the hallmark for the beginning of a high school season.
Yeah.
Of all seasons. And we know that there's cross country in there, which, by the way, we've gotten to see on some of the social media posts that some of the schools are posting. There's been some cross country events, which is great.
Yep.
We're starting to see golf events. I think tennis was another one that's starting to happen. So and it's exciting to drive down the road and see kids practicing. It's like, it gives you a feeling of normalcy, and so
we're starting to get it back. I mean, again, we would never trivialize or minimize the effect of COVID. It's not, we don't believe it's never does it exist type of a thing. It's just how we've handled it. That's always been our point of contention. And so, for us, as when we started this, we started it during COVID. So, and not really understanding what the ramifications would be. I think when we initially started, we kind of thought we'd have games and, everything would be kind of, the way that we're used to, and it just didn't happen that way. So we've really, I think we've kind of evolved into this informational podcast where we're not going to be that forever. We're going to get into this position where we're mostly promoting the sports and the kids and the youth around the area. Yeah. So
excited for that.
A couple of exciting things for this week. Rodrigue Brown from Edison that transferred to Mater Dei, committed to Oklahoma this week. He had offers all across the country, but Stockton Proud, 209, goes out and does good and gets a premier offer and accepts it with in Lincoln Riley's offense. So that'll be pretty exciting for us to be able to follow his career. Like
he's going to be an impact player there for sure. I mean, it's kind of sad we didn't get to see him finish his career here in the Central Valley, or even in California for that matter. But but anybody that has seen him play knows that he is for real. And, it's kind of like they found another Najee Harris, I guess, if you will, because Najee came from Antioch High School, which is right down the road here in Northern California. And so I think Oklahoma caught some lightning in the bottle on this one, and
sure.
It's really going to, I think, make Spencer Rattler even a better quarterback, because now defenses can't just put all their attention on Spencer Rattler because he's a great thrower, he's a great runner. Now they're going to have to look in the backfield and go, oh crap, So
weapons upon weapons.
Yeah, I think look for Oklahoma to be in the national conversation. I think just because of this move, but.
And then I was given word Jamar Marshall ran in his first meet a couple of weeks ago. And finished like 0.03 of a second behind the first play. So he finished second to one of the Baylor runners that is one of the top guys in the country as a freshman. So he goes out there and pretty much is right on his tail the whole way. So
yeah, well, write that down because you're not going to see him in second place too much in his college career. I've gotten the chance to talk to this young man and see him multiple times, and even when he runs a bad race, it's better than most people's best race.
Yeah.
It's like he's just that good.
Then two more newsworthy, or a couple of more newsworthy moves. Escalon, Ripon Christian all moved to the VOL for this season. It's a 1-year temporary move. It's mostly concerning the COVID tiers and how things are being affected and not being allowed to play outside of the county and things like that. So that was a move necessitated by, the kind of the structure of things today. And then Linden has moved into the SJ2A for the purple tier sports, with the intent of moving other sports if necessary, depending on what happens with the rulings from the state as far as the tiers are concerned. So there's some things that are happening, and I think we've talked about this in the past that because of where we are and because of the things that we're going to be dealt, the handwork we've been dealt, we're going to have to make concessions, and we're going to have to do things that are outside the norm and think outside the box to allow these kids and make sure they get to play. So those are good things, and it's good that you see, and not that people, have issues with each other, but it's good that you see people pulling the rope from the same direction.
Yeah. And, this news is interesting to me from purely a sports perspective, because there's always been talk about an Escalon Oakdale rivalry, or something along those lines. And so when you start looking at the potential matchups that we're going to get to see, and I don't know that we're going to be able to go to the games, but it's kind of exciting, really, when you think about it.
That league is the league now.
Yeah. So we've always said that on Friday night, if Escalon's at Ripon or if Ripon's at Escalon, buy your tickets early, because they're going to put on a show. I think there's going to be a couple of more dates now that we can say that about.
Manteca, Oakdale, Sierra. Yeah. You go down the list and it's a murderer's row of high school football teams in the Valley that are just, it's probably 5-6 of the best teams out of, if you had the top 20 in our section, they're probably in the top 20.
I just wish we still had the Stag Stadium at University of the Pacific, so we could schedule a couple of games there, so we could have, X amount of fans and then socially distance them in the stadium, where we could have, maybe a couple thousand fans there and do it safely, but we don't have that anymore. Maybe I can't think of a venue where we could do something like that, but who knows? Maybe this carries over to, pre-conference scheduling in the future on some of these matchups, because now we're showing the conversation always was size of school versus size of school. You can't have a school that has 650 students playing a school that has 2,500 students. Well, yes, I don't know that I always believed in that. I guess it really is that you have a bigger pool to pull from. But what if you have your pool consists of, 3 or 4 Aaron Judges or something like that. Yeah. That's a game changer right there, right? So it's going to be interesting. So maybe the CIF will relax their logic a little bit because of what's going on now. We always talk about, what are the positives that might come out of this in the end? Well, maybe this is one of those. Maybe this is them saying, look, we did this during a tough time. We're going to allow you to pre-conference schedule these teams. And it's kind of like a strength of schedule now when it comes to being chosen for a state game at the end of the year. You know, so if let's say Escalon plays an Oakdale, and Oakdale, we know with, you know, Trent Merzon does such a fantastic job there year in and year out, where you maybe you knock them off one year, or it's a close game and it's a great Escalon team. Now they have a great season. They win their conference. Now it's like you have to have the discussion about a school like that going to the state game if it's even close.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I think I think that's what it was meant to be. And I think that hopefully when CIF decides to do the realignment, they could have a lot more. They're not as rigid as they've been in the past with how they do things, because I think it's okay to have a football only league, and I think it's okay to have a basketball only type of a league, because
absolutely,
you know, that just promotes competition and it allows kids. And I think what happens, and I'm going to be dead honest right now, I think what happens in the Valley for us is that because there's so much mediocrity across most high schools, that the kids that are talented don't get a true look for film and stuff like that. So
right.
Like the Escalon teams or the Ripon teams don't necessarily send kids to play football in college. They send kids to play football at JUCO, which is I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but a lot of those kids are talented enough to play at a 4-year right out of high school.
Yeah, they just haven't gotten the exposure for
exactly.
sure. You know, and you bring up another really interesting point. I love the concept of having leagues driven by sport, because I'll use the example of Linden High School. So Linden High School has a swim team. Well, not all the teams, when they were in the Motherlode League, not all the teams in Motherlode League had swim team.
Yeah.
So really your conference is down to 3-4 teams.
Yeah.
Well, why not, instead of having a 3 or 4 team conference, why not look at all the teams within a certain radius, or all the schools in a certain radius that offer that sport? And now all of a sudden here you have that would be, you know, maybe the Motherlode League or the VOL, whatever. You could still name it after one of those conferences, but it would just be for that sport only.
Yeah.
You know, we saw it with Ripon Christian before they had a football team. They didn't have football, but they were still part of a conference that had basketball.
Yeah.
And so it can be done. It's just, we have to strip the old ways of thinking and, you know, kind of think what's best for each sport. So, you know, you've got a group of tennis coaches that probably are going to, you know, believe that these teams in one conference would make a great conference, or, you know, whatever. And just kind of approach it that way. So I love that idea. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's the business of the day. Today's topic, you know, like I said, you know, I think Scott and I have this, I know that he and I have a passion for, you know, obviously for youth sports, and we have a passion for coaching youth sports. You know, when we were young in our younger days, we loved playing youth sports. And I'll speak for myself now. And, you know, I have a college degree from Cal Poly University of San Luis Obispo for no other reason than I love to play baseball. Now, was I the best baseball player in the world? Not even close. I probably didn't even deserve to be on that team, but I busted my butt, worked as hard as I could, got to play for a Division II national championship my junior year. And then we went Division I my senior year. I got hurt and that was it. But, you know, and then as I got older, I always knew I was going to coach. You know, I grew up, my dad coached, you know, nearly every sport my whole life. And that's kind of how my family set our roots in this town. You know, we're not this big extended family, but because of my dad coaching and the relationships that we built, our family became much bigger. And I think I've noticed it. I was talking to Coach Miller, who we had on a few podcasts ago, yesterday during our conditioning, and I had about 30 kids out there, and they created this big circle while they were stretching, and they were doing more talking than they were doing stretching. And typically, you know, we'd be upset as a coach about that because you're getting ready for the season, or you're getting ready for a game, or you're getting ready for whatever. And so you're trying to get them to flip the switch and be in that mode that, hey, let's get better today. But for the first time in my coaching career, I took a step back and looked at them and saw them smiling and laughing and being around each other and their relationships that they've built. And it's bigger than that. I think both of us know that. I think both of us know the importance of coaching and what it means not only to the kids, but what it means to us as men, us as fathers, us as coaches, and as us as friends, I mean, and we, much like we do with our kids, you raise your kids and you're their parent, and then at one point they become your friend. There's not supposed to be your friend when they're a kid, when they're a child. You're supposed to be the parent. They have to have some direction and some order. And as they get to a point in their lives where they make sound decisions and can take care of themselves and they're independent, then you become friends. And that's happy. And we've seen the evolution of that. As a coach, I'm not friends with my players. I mean, I'm friendly with my players, and I love my players, and I love the kids that, the efforts that they put forth and being around them. And it's not even if they're the best player or the worst player. It has nothing to do with that. It's just, right. They're people, and they become my sons. And when I was coaching softball, they become my daughters, on the field. Sure. And that passion for it, exudes through those children, and it's reciprocated. They understand why you're there, and they understand, hey, he's tough on me, and he's a jerk, and he's this and he's that, but then he'll walk up to me and he'll put his arm around me and tell me it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So seeing that kind of, I mean, we get, you and I have talked about this. It gets old. I mean, dealing with parents is probably the toughest part of coaching, right. But, and it runs a lot of people off. But at the end of the day, the positives that come from it, most of the time outweigh the negatives, tenfold.
Absolutely. And, I think our goal as we progress through this, and you and I briefly touched upon this, but to actually have a round table on one of our podcasts where we have, coaches from several generations, where we come in and we talk about it. And I think you'll find that in terms of passion, that transcends through generations. That doesn't change. Like, if a coach is passionate about his sport, is passionate about his players, and compassionate, I don't think that changes too much across the board. But what changes, and I think you and I are, we're the same age, but there's a little bit of a generational gap in terms of our coaching pedigree, because I quit coaching when I had my two girls, and maybe someday I'll get back into it, but you've been coaching through the development of social media. I didn't have to deal with that. Social media wasn't a thing when I was coaching. I think we were just on the precipice of it, but I don't know as a coach how I would deal with a lot of that. I have ideas and I've thought about it, but the coaches today having that additional element, and there's so much social media out there now. Most of us are familiar with, was it Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter and these others. Yeah. But there's so much more than that we don't know anything about. I couldn't begin to tell you. Yeah. And so as a coach, that's another element in what you were talking about. And you're 100% correct about, dealing with parents can be a very laborious, thing. And more so with social media, where things can be said by people with no ramifications coming back. It used to be that, fans would be in the stands and they would say this or say that. Big deal. They're saying it. But now people are getting behind, anonymous posts and saying stuff. And it's like, that can be damaging as well. So I think my point is that it's really awesome to see coaches in today's day and age that are so passionate and still doing what they do, even though they're dealing with a whole nother level of crap, I guess, if you will, on this.
Well, and social media is your friend and it's your enemy. I mean, it's, and I'm not the best coach in the world. And I mean, I do the best I can with what I know. And I use social media to promote our program. I never specifically mention individuals until it comes down to all league. And then that's out of my hands. It has nothing to do with it. So I promote that, but I never, if our quarterback goes off on Friday night, I don't get on social media bragging about the quarterback. We talk about the effort of the team,
Yeah, I've read your social media posts on kind of a post game wrap up. Yeah, and that's all it is. When you post stuff on there, it really is. You're not on there going, say Johnny was amazing tonight or anything. It's always team oriented, and as a fan, it's always kind of cool because when you look at like colleges and you go to Texas and some of these other places where the coaches have a talk show or, or go on the radio or something like that, this is in lieu of that in a good way, so it allows you to communicate with your masses and let them know, what the thought process was or, during the game and a nice recap. And so, as a parent, if I was a parent of one of your athletes, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. That's nice for you to say. And the thing for me too is, let's not get it twisted. Like Scott and I both understand from a parental perspective, there are children, and if the coach we have our own opinions too. And whether a coach is a good coach or a bad coach or whatever, it's irrelevant, because when your child is being, hurt, emotionally or, hopefully not physically, but, emotionally because they didn't get to do what they wanted or whatever, you're going to want, your first thing as a parent is to come to their defense. And I've never faulted a parent for standing up for their child. My fault to parents I've dealt with in the past is the way it's been handled. It's been, there's not a coach. Okay, let me rephrase that. The majority of coaches are not out there to harm a child, to take anything an experience away from a child, or to not field the best possible team that they can. All of us that get into coaching, and I would say this almost to a person, you get into coaching for two reasons. You get into coaching to promote the development of children, and you get into to coaching to be competitive because you have something that drives you that makes you want to win.
Yeah.
And so you can fault a coach for wanting to win. You can be upset with them because, he didn't play Susie or Johnny because all he cares about is winning. That's not necessarily fair, because the time that's put in, and all sports vary, but the time that's put in, there's not a person out there that is going to play it. The majority of coaches would not play a child that doesn't deserve to play, even if it meant winning or losing. Mm-hmm. So if my intent is to go win every game I possibly can, because winning promotes a healthy environment. I can get kids to get better grades. I can get kids to show up to school. I can get kids to show up to practice. I can get kids to show up to the weight room. But if it's it's a chicken and the egg. Yeah. You have to be able to win to be able to get kids to play.
Absolutely.
But you can't win without getting kids to play.
Yeah, winning, it's amazing how much of an impact winning has on a culture. There, I know we're kind of drawn down to the end of today's podcast, and there's really only two things left I want to talk about. One of them pertains to what we're talking about right now in terms of coaching. And this goes back quite a ways. I was coaching wrestling, and I got into a groove, I guess, if you will, of coaching. I was a student of the sport. I would go home at night and watch film. I'd go to clinics. I'd read books. Any competitive edge I could get, to try to teach the athletes. But there was something I was missing. And one night after practice, the kids are getting cleaned up. They're heading out, and a parent comes in. It's the parent of maybe the best wrestler I ever coached. And, that might be a giveaway. Anybody who knows Linden history probably knows who I'm talking about, but comes in and had a very frank discussion with me on how I was treating our wrestlers. He says, he gave me some great advice. He goes, you can't treat everyone the same. He goes, if this is the way it's going to be, taking my son and we're going somewhere else. And in that moment, I could have been upset. I could have been like, get the hell out of here. You don't know what you're talking about, this and that. But really, it was a wake-up call for me. And he did it in a way that wasn't, demeaning to me or anything like that. He's just like, I don't think you realize what you're doing. Yeah. And he was right. I didn't realize what I was doing. I went home and kind of did this self-evaluation, and I was like, he's absolutely right. And the very next day, I'm like, I'm changing what I'm doing in practice. I'm changing what I'm doing on my approach to things. And the next year, we won the first championship in school history. And I really go back to that night was really the catalyst for how we got there.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize what I was doing wrong, and I was doing something wrong. I mean, I can't go into great detail about it because we could spend a whole podcast about things that I've done wrong. But in that time, that's an instance where a parent came in and really influenced me in a good way, even though he was pointing out negativity that I was part of. And it changed what I was doing. So, we're not just bagging on parents that come in and want to say this or that. We know there's a process now, the 24-hour rule, the 48-hour rule, go through your athlete first if that's not improved. And, there's a chain of events that I think Linden High School even has in place to follow that really, gets rid of a lot of problems. So, I just want to share that story because that was a time that had such an incredible impact on me as a coach in a good way. Yeah. And it really changed the way I did things. And I think in the long run made our culture better in the wrestling room for sure.
Well, and I think that, like you said, it's the way you handle a conversation, the way that it's presented to you. And even if it's negative, as long as somebody's not disrespectful or playing the blame game or whatever, it's easy for anybody to sit and point fingers at what somebody does or decisions they make. I mean, all of us, in an instant, you're expected to make a call that's going to affect the outcome of a game or the outcome of a kid's opportunity or whatever. And it's not, I mean, again, I'll go back and say it again. I can't imagine anybody that would get into coaching sports that would have any ill will or ill intent towards a child, and not have their better interest at heart. Now, we've seen some little league stuff that happens where the dad coaches and puts his kid in a position where he doesn't belong and things like that. So I'm not gonna say none of them. Or these a lot of travel ball teams are offshoots of another team because their kid didn't get to play where they wanted him to play, so they start their own team, which has diluted the product. It puts your kids in a worse situation. I mean, the reality of it is if I see tweets and stuff all the time from coaches with great advice. Hey, if you have a problem on your travel team, and if you have a problem on your high school team, and you have a problem in the classroom, what's the common denominator?
You might be the problem.
Yeah, you might be the problem.
Yeah.
So, and I get it. Like, I've had some very frank conversations with people about the way I've done things in the past, and I think as we age, we get a little bit wiser, I guess, and probably a little bit less intense. Not that we don't want to win just as much, but I think you prioritize things a little bit differently, and so you put yourself in a better situation. And then, the other part of it is the social part for us and the kids, and the relationships that we build with them and our coaching staffs. You and I've been through a lot of stuff with some people. I've coached with guys that we've lost. During the season, one of our coaches, we lost Coach Englehart, 5 or 6 years ago, and Aaron and I were great friends. And I remember getting a phone call like it was yesterday at 6:30 in the morning telling me he'd passed, and we're right in the middle of baseball season. He's supposed to help me play our coach, and it's just like the worst thing ever. And then you got to have that conversation with the kids, and we spent the vast majority of the day crying together, and just kind of dealing with it. And now the school has really adopted Aaron and his family and the memorial fund and the things, and we have any kids that play 3-sport athletes get a coachee patch now. That's because Aaron played all 3 sports. And, so we have a lot of those stories, and a lot of those relationships that we have in life that are very important to us and very important to our programs and very important to our own families. I mean, I got kids that I coach that call me regularly still, and some of those kids are like my sons, and now they've become like my friends, so it's difficult. It's special, those relationships are important, but I'm sure you have things that have happened, or that you've gone through in life that are, much like that too.
Yeah. And that's a nice segue to the last thing that I'm going to talk about today. And this is tough to talk about because, you coach a lot of special kids over the years, and Jesus Zambrano was one of those kids. Sorry, this is a little tough. He was laid to rest yesterday, and Jesus was a young man. He was one of those kids that's an absolute dream to coach. He was the son of farm laborers. His work ethic was off the charts. His willingness to learn, his passion for the sport was amazing. He was a heavyweight. I think he wrestled 215s for my freshman year, but then he became a heavyweight. And let me tell you something, this guy was a bag of toughness. He was so strong, just naturally strong. And then you couple that with how hard he worked in the weight room, and anybody that knew Jesus knows exactly what I'm talking about. He was the type of kid that when he stepped on the mat, he would rip your head off. And then as soon as the whistle blows, he'd be worried about if you were okay. I mean, this kid had a heart of gold. He had the biggest heart. And, someday when I go to heaven, this is going to be one that God's going to have to explain to me because I don't get it. But God has a bigger plan for all of us, and trust that there's a reason for this. If you knew Jesus, you were a very fortunate person. He, one of the stories that comes to mind to me the most was he was wrestling in the section tournament, and it's tough to get there. I think Jared Quinones was there. I'm trying to remember the group of kids that I had at that particular tournament, but Jesus' first match, and I didn't tell him who it was. I just told him the name and where this kid was from, but it was the number 2 kid in the state. And I didn't want to tell Jesus this because then, it would be on his mind or this and that. He goes in there and just pummels this kid, just pummels him. The coach, this kid's coach was beside himself. He couldn't believe that some unranked wrestler comes in and beats the number 2 kid in the state. And that was definitely one of the highlights of my coaching career. I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. But the humbleness, even after he comes off the mat, and I was just like, he couldn't understand why I was so excited. He just thought, I beat a guy in the, this and that. And he walks over and I just put my arm around him. I go, Jesus, that was the number 2 kid in the state. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me. And if you knew Jesus, he had this grin that was just like, oh, okay. And it was so cool. I mean, it was almost like it was yesterday. And we lost this young man way, way too early. And what really, it breaks my heart more than I can tell you. But what breaks my heart more is that Jesus several years ago lost his wife in a vehicle accident. So they had a daughter together, and this, we'll get the information. We'll post it on our website. But if there's any way for you to help out this family, they could use making sure that their daughter's taken care of and stuff. So, but Jesus, we love you, and just don't lateral drop God when you're up there in heaven. So anyway, that's what I have to say.
That's a good a testimony to your relationship with the kids you have, and it just kind of reiterates where we've been. I mean, we've dealt with a lot of these types of things over the years, and Jesus wasn't the first that you've had to deal with in that situation, and definitely won't be the last. And that's the exposure that we put ourselves at when we decide to coach. And that's where I think that all of us think, oh, we're going to get into coaching and it's going to be great, and then we get to do X's and O's, and we get to be able to set a lineup, and we get to do this, and then you get into this thing about your feelings and your emotions and your relationships. And I remember my dad told me a long, long time ago, he goes, I never realized how much I could love something until I had a kid. And, and you also don't realize how selfish you are until you have kids either. But when he told me that, it never made sense, because he always said, if I knew how much I was going to love you, I'd have never had you. And, it took me probably till my adult years to figure that out. And it almost goes the same with coaching. When we choose to coach, we don't think about these types of issues, these types of real life situations, and the reality of and the fragility of life, and we've been dealing with it, and it's been difficult, and losing Jesus and other, family members that we've lost, recently, and things like that are difficult for all of us. But, like you said, somebody upstairs has a plan. Somebody's got a plan that's big that we don't even understand, and it's part of what we go through. And for kids like Jesus that have such an impact on our lives, and I have a bunch of them myself. I mean, I do. I just, fortunately for me, I haven't lost anybody yet.
And hopefully you never do.
Yeah, hopefully I precede all of them.
No offense, Chris, but hopefully you go before any of those guys.
I would take that. Just like my own, they're just like my own kids. So, hopefully this wasn't, too emotional or too difficult for people to listen to. Hopefully it shed some light on things, because it's, the coaches are people too. And as much as we can be pissed off at them, a lot of the time, or pointing fingers at all the bad decisions we make. Think about if you had fans in the stands watching you do your job, and how many times you don't do the right thing, that you got booed or yelled at or talked about or whatever. How would that look? And that's where, and coaches do it to themselves. You know what you're signing up for. I'm not sitting here saying, oh, poor coaches or poor me or anything. I'm not saying that, but it's a fact of life. And it's, we're human error is part of, and it's, you look at referees, and umpires, you got the best guys in the world blow calls. The Super Bowl is talked about regularly the last few days about how poor the officiating was. Not that that the Chiefs offensive line was just absolutely wretched that day, but for us, like I said, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, or a month or so, we'll be able to get into some actual competition and talk about some of the things that are going on, because that's exactly why we started the podcast. We've been, like I said, more of a passer along of information. And so if you ever have anything you need to get to us, you can always reach us at 209 Prep on Twitter, on Facebook at 209 Prep Sports. And you can always email us at prepsports209@yahoo.com. Again, that's prepsports209@yahoo.com. Thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.